Today, climate change is no longer wildly denied. Woohoo! Instead, the story has changed. Oh, you might hear things like, the climate has always changed. Humans are not the main cause. It's too late to do anything anyway. These messages, they feel different, calmer, less aggressive, but they serve a similar purpose. Delay. At the same time, climate activism has become one of the most powerful learning spaces of our time. Welcome to episode 2, where we leave the past and we start observing the present. My name's Christine Jorgensen. I'm a scientist, and I've been working in science communication for 10 years. Let's take a look at when learning moves into the streets. Now, in the present day society, learning about climate change no longer happens just in classrooms, textbooks, or scientific journals. It actually happens in streets, filled with chanting voices, in handwritten signs held above heads, in community halls, and even across social media feeds late at night. Learning has moved into public space, and it has become collective. Now, for many people, especially young people, climate activism is where climate knowledge stops being abstract and starts to feel real. Scientific concepts that once lived in graphs and reports are translated into shared language, into slogans, chants, images, and even stories that can be understood, repeated, and felt. Movements like the Fridays for Future have played a key role in this type of shift, transforming data into something people can carry and shout and stand behind. Now, in these spaces, learning is no longer passive. It is emotional, it's social, and it's really urgent. Standing among others who share fear, anger, hope, and determination, it changes how knowledge is experienced. Climate change, it becomes more than a scientific issue. It becomes a moral one. Participants don't just learn about climate change, they learn what it means for their lives, their futures, and their sense of responsibility. Now, activism, it also teaches skills that formal education does not. People learn how to organize, communicate, collaborate, and challenge authority. They learn how to speak publicly, how to listen to others, and how to turn concern into action. These forms of learning are informal but deeply transformative. Now, perhaps most importantly, activism creates meaning. Facts alone don't always motivate change, but when knowledge is shared collectively, when it's connected to identity and purpose, it gains power. And in this way, activism becomes a classroom without walls, a place where learning is lived, not just learned. Now, what's important to notice is how climate misinformation has changed over time. See, in the early stages of public climate debate, misinformation was often direct and absolute. The claim was simple: climate change isn't real. This form of denial rejected scientific evidence outright, and it framed climate change as a hoax or an exaggeration. Now, while that narrative was effective for a time, it actually became increasingly difficult to sustain as scientific consensus strengthened and climate impacts became more visible. As a result, misinformation evolved. Rather than denying climate change entirely, newer narratives began to accept that, yeah, climate change is happening, but they minimized its causes and the significance. Claims such as the climate has always changed or humans aren't the main cause reframe scientific findings without rejecting them outright. These arguments, they sound reasonable, they sound measured, which makes them harder to challenge and easier to accept. This shift really matters because it reshapes how people learn about climate change. Instead of questioning whether climate change exists, the focus moves to responsibility, urgency, and action. By downplaying human influence or framing climate change as inevitable, these narratives reduce the perceived need for political or social change. In this way, misinformation continues to function as a barrier to learning and action. It doesn't eliminate climate knowledge, but it distorts it, shaping public understanding in ways that continue to delay response and maintain existing power structures. Now, learning through climate activism about subjects such as this, it doesn't look the same everywhere, because climate activism itself is shaped by social, economic, and political contexts. In the global north, climate activism, it often centers on awareness raising, policy reform, and preventing future harm. Learning is framed around scientific evidence projections and risk management. Movements such as the youth climate strikes encourage participants to understand climate change through data, expert knowledge, and civic engagement. Activism becomes a space where people learn how to communicate science, influence decision makers, and participate in democratic processes. Whereas in the global south, climate activism is frequently rooted in immediate survival. Communities mobilize to protect land, water resources, livelihoods, and cultural continuity in the face of environmental destruction. Learning in these contexts is deeply place-based and relational, passed through lived experience, intergenerational knowledge, and collective resistance. Rather than focusing on future risk, activism in the global south responds to present and ongoing harm. Now, despite the depth and the urgency of global south learning, global north movements tend to dominate digital and media spaces. Their messages are much more visible online, their language, it travels further, their protests, aesthetics, they're more easily recognized within global climate discourse. As a result, certain forms of climate learning are amplified, while others remain marginal or even invisible. This imbalance does not reflect the value of knowledge being produced, but the power structures that determine whose learning is seen, shared, and legitimized on a global scale. The question I have is that as we learn through climate activism today, are we learning in ways that challenge inequality, or are we unknowingly reproducing it? See, activism teaches us what matters, it teaches us what deserves attention, it teaches us what we're willing to act on, but it also reveals what we've been taught to ignore.